Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the YouTube channel grecochess. My name is Karilos Aniziris, and I'm going to share with you one more exciting game I played at the Connecticut State Chess Championship. The tournament took place 2 weeks ago, a little bit more than 2 weeks ago, and here are the details. The location is the Trinity College at Hartford, Connecticut. The day of the tournament was Sunday, November 9th, and the format was 4 rounds Swiss. The various categories were the following. The champion that would determine who would be the Connecticut State Chess Champion. Under 2200, too high for me. Under 1800, that's where I participated, and there was under 1300 and under 800. And for my category and for the highest one, the time control was G45 plus 10. What does it mean? It means that when the game starts, both players have 45 minutes on the clocks. And after every move they play, they get an increment of 10 seconds, meaning they get 10 more seconds on their clock. And players need to complete all their moves before the clock goes down to zero. Before we begin, a huge thank you to the organizers because they had the tables, the chessboards, and the clocks ready and set correctly, so players didn't need to worry about these things. This made the players' job so much easier. The next item I want to share with you is who was my opponent at the second round. His name is John Pasco, and his rating, as you see here, is 1700. Compare this with my own rating of 1595. So clearly John was the favorite. And after my loss in round 1 that I presented in the previous video, now it's time to see what happened at game number 2. And I'm going to share the screen with you, the chess.com chessboard. And what's going to happen is I'm going to enter by hand one move after the other as I copy them from the score sheet. And after every move, computer will tell us what does it think. If white is better, computer will throw out the positive number. If black is better, computer will throw out the negative number. Computer will tell us which move would have been the best and what are the top 5 options for the other player. In this game, I play with the white pieces. And I start with my pawn going to e4, the most popular first move for white. And John replies to the perk defense, pawn to d6. It's a book move, not the most popular. The most popular ones are pawn to c5, to e5, perhaps the French pawn to e6, but d6 is a decent, okay opening. My second move, pawn to d4. And John sends his knight to f6 to threaten my pawn at e4. If I push my pawn to e5, we change pawns, but then John takes my queen on d1, and I have no castling rights any longer. Instead, I defend the pawn by sending my knight to c3, developing my knight, and pawn takes more control of the center with sending his pawn to e5. At this point, we change pawns on e5, and I grab John's queen. Of course, he'll take it back, but now John has no castling rights. We completed the first 5 moves, all of them book moves. I have a small advantage, 0.40, mostly because I started first. Next move, I want to pin the knight on f6, bishop goes to g5. And John replies, not unpinning it by sending his bishop to e6. And now I'm going to castle, safeguard my king, develop my rook to the open d file, and check at the same time. Queenside castling with one move. And John sends his king to c8. Completed the first 7 moves. All of them are book moves, but now we're going to leave theory. I'm going to play a move that is not in the quote-unquote book, meaning it is not completely in the opening theory. Knight f3, and computer doesn't like it. Thinks it's inaccuracy. I lose all of my advantage. Why computer does not explain, but my feeling is that it says I should have pushed the pawn to f4. My feeling is that if I push the pawn to f4, then the knight can go to f3 without blocking the f pawn. Knight to d7, for John. The reason why he did it, first of all, by sending my knight to f3, I attacked the pawn on e5, and John, by sending his knight to d7, not only he develops the knight, but protects the pawn on e5. When bishop goes to f5 now, develop the bishop, attack the knight, hoping that if I took the knight, then the knight on d7, then a knight on f3 could take the pawn, but that is not the case. Computer would rather have me put bishop to h4 and then g3 and attack second time the pawn. Here, even if John would let me take the knight, then the other knight on f6 is not pinned any longer, can take back and protects the pawn on e5. How does John reply? With an even stronger move, pawn to c6. Now, in addition to everything else, I need to think, what should I do with my bishop? I cannot keep it on b5. I send it back to a4. And John sends his bishop to b4. Not only develops the bishop, but also threatens the knight on c3. And if the knight is gone, if there is the exchange, not only I double my pawns, but also I'm going to lose my pawn on e4 that's attacked by the knight on f6. At this point, we completed the first 10 moves, and believe it or not, John is ahead by 0.52. Not that great yet, but you see the tide is turning. I can feel it that things are not going to be so nice for me. How to defend my pawn on e4? If I send my rook to e1, for example, then the knight on c3 is pinned. So let's first get rid of this knight on f6. And John takes it back with his pawn. At least now my pawn on e4 is not attacked any longer. My bishop goes to b3. I want to challenge the other bishop. That is on e6. And John decides to damage the pawn structure by taking the knight on c3. And look at what's happening. We both have 7 pawns. We both have 3 pawn islands. But mine, 2 of my pawn islands are horrible. Pawn a2, pawn c2, c3. While John's double pawn is f7, f6, and e5 support each other. The only perhaps weakness is the pawn on h7, but it doesn't seem it's easy for me to attack it. John will once again threaten my pawn on e4 by sending his knight to c5. I'm defending by sending my rook to e1. King goes to c7, and by doing so, John helps the two rooks, a8 and h8. They collaborate with each other, and they have access to the entire 8th rank, both of them. And for me, time to get rid of this bishop on e6, because it blocks my bishop, and my bishop on b3 cannot do too many things. John takes it back. And we completed the first 15 moves, and John's advantage is 0.49. My pawn on e4 is still under attack. Yes, it's protected by the rook on e1, but I want more protection. And my knight goes to d2. And John will send his rook to d8. I want more protection of that pawn. I don't want to have pieces protecting it. I want to be protected by pawn, so my pawn goes to f3. But computer doesn't like it, would rather have my knight go to b3. I have a chain of pawns from g2 to f3 and going to e4. Most of the times, pawn chains are good, they support each other, but this time the computer did not like it. Knight goes to a4 and threatens my pawn on c3. My rook goes to e3 to defend it. Knight goes now to b6. When it goes to d3, I hope I can exchange rooks with John and also straighten my pawns. John sends again his knight to e4. What he's hoping is that if we exchange rooks, then my c3 pawn is going to be once again unprotected. And my king cannot go to b2 to defend it because the knight at a4 controls the b2 square. So what do I do? Knight goes to b3. So if rooks are exchanged, the second rook can protect the pawn. And John will take my rook. Move number 20. Great moves is the computer. John's advantage increases to 0.95. Things don't start not going well, don't go well. I was feeling this at that time. What can I do? If I take with my c2 pawn, take the rook on d3, then my pawn structure is better, but I lose the c3 pawn. But in order to stay equally material, I had to suffer. Rook goes to d3. Yes, the rook on d3 controls the entire open d file, but my pawn structure is still horrible. And yes, my rook on d3 is controlling an open file, but it cannot move from there. Otherwise, I lose my pawn on c3. Not easy to protect it because king cannot go to b2 because of the knight at a4. Perhaps king go to d2. Let's see. And John decides to start an attack along the queen side, pawn to b5, where I was weak. My knight goes to d2, give more flexibility to my knight, perhaps even send it to b1 and protect the c3 pawn. Knight goes to c5 for John and threatening my rook on d3. And you can see that my rook is only one square to go. No matter where it goes, d4, d5, d6, d7, d8, it's going to be lost. So it has only one square to go. Unfortunately, that square existed. I felt a little bit scared until I saw at least I have one square to send my rook to e3 and not lose it. But great moves as a computer? Yes, the only move. But now my rook does not control the wonderful open d file any longer. The e file is closed. John continues the attack, pawn to a5, along the queen side with the pawn storm as it's called. My knight goes to b3, hoping to exchange knights. And John cannot just leave his knight there, it's going to be lost. Of course, he could move his king to b6 or d6. If he takes my knight on b3, then I take back with my pawn and I fix my pawn structure. So what does he do? Go back to b7. And this allows my knight to go to d2. Computer would rather have my pawn go to a3. And pawn goes to a4. John continues the pawn storm along the queen side. Hopefully, what he is dreaming is to start exchanging pawns until he has one passed pawn and either promote it or have me sacrifice a piece to stop the promotion. At this point, we completed the first 25 moves. And John is ahead by 0.81. Let's see. First of all, let's stop this advance. Pawn goes to a3. Otherwise, pawn can go c5 and b4, and I'm in a very bad shape. John continues pawn to c5 as planned. And now I decide, since there's only so much I can do kingside, I cannot push this pawn to c4 because then b4 comes here and John has a passed pawn. So let's play on the queen side. Excuse me, on the king side, g5. Pawn goes to g4. Can we do anything there? Computer hates it, inaccuracy, and John advantage becomes 1.20. King goes to c6. And now I push the other pawn to h4 along the king side. I got confused because this is the king side, but the two kings are on the queen side. So pawn goes to h4, and now John will try to stop it a little bit. Pawn goes to h6. My rook goes to e2, hoping to go to the g and h files and assist my pawns in being pushed. Knight goes to d6 for John. Rook goes to f2 to help with the f pawn if I want to push it, for example, to f3. The knight at d2 supports the e4 pawn. And John continues the queenside attack, pawn to b4. Inaccuracy says a computer would rather have John send his rook on g8 and stop my kingside pawn storm. We completed the first 30 moves, and after this inaccuracy, my deficit from 0.61 is now just to 0.08. John is still slightly ahead, but the game is more or less even. My next move, pawn to b4. John replies the same way, pawn to b4, and the a and b pawns seem to be quite dangerous. I take the pawn on b4, and now I'm ahead by +1 pawn. But the a pawn, John's a pawn, is very dangerous, and it's not easy for me to stop it. My rook on f2 will have a tough time blocking the pawns. John's turn, move number 32, king goes to b5, attacks my pawn on b4. My pawn goes to c3, and I'm now 1 pawn ahead. Not sure for how long it's going to stay. Pawn to a3 for John continues, and he's 2 squares away from promoting. My king needs to go to b1. I'm out of moves. John strengthens his position by sending the knight to c4. Computer doesn't like it. Inaccuracy, and finally starts having the advantage. For the first time after the book moves, I'm ahead by 0.18. My knight goes to b3 to not allow to control the a1 square, the square promotion. And knight goes to b2 for John. By doing so, he ensures that my rook cannot go to a2. At this point, we completed the first 35 moves, and finally, I am back. The game is even. What is going to happen? I know that if I can stop the a2 pawn, excuse me, the a3 pawn, if I can take it one way or the other, then I have great chances. I'm already a pawn ahead. Not only that, my pawns at b and c are now protected, connected, protected pass pawns. We'll have a great future once the a pawn disappears. But will this happen? My king goes to a2, and John will send his king into c4, ready to grab my pawn at c3. And I'm going to check with my knight going to a5. Why? Because once John moves his king, for example, and that's what he did. He took my pawn on c3. Next move, I'm free to get the a3 pawn. At this point, believe it or not, we reached the situation where we had less than 5 moves, so we didn't keep the score from now on, and I can only rely on my memory. What happened is that after I grabbed the pawn at a3, John tried to check me, and with a knight going to c4, knowing that there was a pin on my knight. And it was a difficult game. I don't remember too much. I remember that after that we're continuing, and somehow I was able to get the advantage. We ended up in a very sharp ending with rooks and pawns, knights, rooks and pawns, and in the end, I emerged the winner. So after my loss at the first game, I had a win at the second game. Unfortunately, there is no way to recover what happened from now on without the score sheets, and I hope you understand why there is this rule, because at 5 minutes every second becomes crucial and they want the game to be decided by chess skill and not by who is the fastest one to write the score. We're going to do a review of what happened in this game, at least for the moves that I had in my score sheet. I had 90.7 accuracy, John had 92.8, and we played as if our skills were 2450, way above our exact skills. Mine was 1595 and John's was 1700. I believe that this game rating is very flattering, to say the least. And what did you do in the various categories? One great move for John, best 10 for me, 14 for John, excellent 5 for me, 7 for John, good 7 for me, 3 for John, book 7 each, inaccuracy 7 for me, 3 for John, and mistakes 1 for me and 2 for John. And this concludes the coverage of this game of the second round. There are 2 more rounds to go that will be covered in next videos, but let's see how the online tournaments are going. grecochess, nothing new. Still waiting to see what will happen in Group 1, if Hunting Achievement is going to play. It's 12 more days. And in Group 3, it is me, the Harry from Greece, versus the Line from Hungary. And these 2 games are going on, very exciting. And let's see what's happening at the Underwater Moonlight Tournament of my subscriber. 81 players, 9 groups of 9. The first 3 from everyone advanced to the semifinal. 13.5 for Lotus Time Chess, leads in Group 1. And as we said before, has guaranteed his advancing to the next round. Group 2, Spider 99 from Egypt leads with 11 points. Group 3, NV Carvanans from the United States, and Zanilor, my subscriber from Italy, the organizer of this tournament, lead with 10 points. Vigar Kavan, the United States player, sorry, I can pronounce that, is 46 tie-breaking points versus 40 from Zanilor. Group 4, Iraq Lion from Iraq leads with 9 points. Group 5, Chinan Fu from Greenland leads with 13 points. Group 6, Mathis B 2008 from France leads with 13.5. Group 7, Jendal F from Uzbekistan has 14.5 points, have completed all of the games. And I'm doing the calculation in my mind, and yes, as we mentioned in the previous video, he has guaranteed advancing to the next round. Group 8, it's my group. Khaled Katab from Egypt leads with 7.5 points. Second place for Guguship Original from the European Union has 7 points, and I'm on third with 7 points. But as you may see, because I have 8 losses and have only 1 game to go, my position doesn't look that promising, to put it mildly. The first 3 advance, and at most I can get 8 points. In the last group, with Steam Rocket from Australia leading with 9 points. This concludes the coverage of the second round of the Connecticut State Chess Championship that took place on November 9th. We have two more games to go and then 3 games from Chessanity. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for watching. Thanks to the subscribers. We have more subscribers every day. Thanks to the viewers, the likes, and to the wonderful encouraging comments we receive from time to time. I'm Harry Lasaniziris. This is my Greco Chess YouTube channel. For now, goodbye.